Hello and welcome. This is Impact 2022, our continuing conversation where we talk about all types of topics and issues where it comes from race, religion, current events, all of these type of issues that we wrestle with. And the way that we do that is through a conversation. And that is through your comments, your questions that you can put into the comment section. And we address those as we go on through this journey of being able to tackle different topics. And from time to time, we hit on a number of different topics. If you have been with us, you know that we will talk about everything. We've talked about race and the intersection of race when it comes to police violence and social justice. We've talked about race when it comes to representation on social media or on television. You know that we've talked about religion. We've talked about different aspects of it. We go into the deep topics. We talk about abortion. We talk about race within the church. We talk about our responsibilities. We've gone all over the place, and tonight is no different. What we've often tried to do, and I keep saying we because this is a collective effort. But what we've also often tried to do is bring up topics that people may not be looking at in their everyday lives. May not be able to see on your normal commute. The cross section between work, your family life, and whatever activities you have going on. You may miss some of the important things that are going on throughout the country, throughout the world, or even in our own backyards. And we want to put a spotlight on some of the areas that we need to talk about, or that you need to know about, or that should be a discussion point, or that we should have the opportunity to care about. It's a horrible thing that when I hear people say, "Well, I care about the things that I care about, or I care about the things that I know about." Well, what about all the stuff you don't know? And so the more you know, the more you can kind of lend an ear and care about. And so what we're going to talk about today, that we've talked about multiple times, is one of the keys that people have said on this program and many other programs that you may see. One of the keys to having a functioning society here in the United States is voting, and voting rights and the ability to vote. And the ability not to be restricted from voting, but from a different type of a standpoint, from a Christian standpoint, in the sense of, what is our responsibility? Always back to the church. What are our responsibility when it comes to voting? So right now, there's been some attacks on voting, depending on the way that you look at it. In Alabama right now, they have a voting going before the Supreme Court to talk about how they're voting and redistricting or districting their areas. And the question is whether or not redistricting should be colorblind, racially blind, or not. As long as we have a redistricting that seems fair, relatively, racially blind. So we cut this district up in the manner, or we cut our state up to do districts, different voting districts, in a manner that represents the state in the way that we want it to be represented. As long as we don't do this in a racially biased way, where we say, well, we're cutting this district up to make it all whites, and we're cutting this district up to make it all black, and we're cutting this district up to make it all whatever. As long as we're not doing that, then we should be okay. As long as we are not intentionally and obviously disenfranchising groups of people, then we should be okay. Whereas the counterpoint to that is that being racially blind is not being fair, racially fair, and necessarily fair. And that leads into a broad conversation of should we be colorblind or should we not? The church, same situation. We've talked about it here. We've had some explosive actually conversations here with some of the comments and some of the different people that we've had. When it comes back to the same situation of should we be colorblind as people in the church, or should we be cognizant of color and differences? So the question at hand and what's going on before the Supreme Court when it comes to the voting situation is, again, if you make something that is colorblind, does that trump everything and it makes it fair and okay? Where, again, the other argument or the alternative argument is that rules weren't made to be colorblind. They were made to make sure that one group was not disenfranchised, especially a group of color. And so in Alabama right now, they have decided to cut up the districts in a manner that does not allow representation of the Black people. So the majority, there's no district or there's no area where Black people have the majority vote. And it's not because they tried to disenfranchise per se the Black vote, but what they did was they cut it up in a manner where it doesn't incentivize. And so there is no, even though there's 27% of the population in Alabama is Black, there is no district where they would be represented. So they would not send a representative to the U.S. government, to the House of Representatives. They wouldn't have one to send because they wouldn't have that vote. They wouldn't have, and for this, a Democrats wouldn't control an area, historically control an area to be able to send someone to the House. And so then the question has gone on in different areas is whether or not cutting up districts and making it so that the districts are maybe fair in the way that they're cut up. We put 100,000 people here, 100,000 people here, 100,000 people here, socioeconomic, we do here, here. If you cut all of the districts up, or you cut all of the state up in a way that you vote for your different representatives and you have none of them which are representative of people of color, none of them where people of color can vote and actually gain a majority to be able to pick the person that they want, are you being fair? Again, you're being fair because you're being colorblind, but are you being fair? Why is that important? Because then it leads into the broader conversation of actually affirmative action. You're like, well, how does that one connect to the other? It's the same issue. If you have standards that are colorblind, and those colorblind standards find a way to eliminate or alienate or underrepresent people of color, then is it fair? All right. You see the balance there? Is it fair just because it's colorblind and we're not being discriminatory in the way that we set it up? Is it fair? Because it's not being discriminatory towards people of color, but it's not being representative. Church. Why do we need, or why do we have separate churches? A church over here and a church over there. A church of majority Black people, a church of majority white people, a church of majority wealthy people, a church of majority poor people, a church of majority people who have had rough lives, ex-felons, rough around the edges, and people who are very conservative in the way that they dress and look and act and prissy. Why do we have different groups in different churches? Back to the voting issue. The reason that we talk about having Black people to have a district is because they need their representation. You have all of these different churches and you have all of these different groups, because if you have a church that's full of white people, you know you're going to have some white representation and voice when it comes to leadership. If you have a church of all Black people, you know you're going to have Black people in leadership and a voice. If you have a church of all people who are wealthy, You know you're going to have a wealthy voice. And if you have a church that is full of people who are economically challenged, you know that you will have a voice there in leadership. It is about representation, participation, and a voice, and not necessarily about mixing it all together and making it colorblind or making it blind to people's different situations. I'm going to hit this comment, and then let's be honest. Many who want to redraw voting districts are looking for an advantage and not fairness. Yeah, you're looking for an advantage and not fairness. If you are the majority, whether that majority is on whatever characteristic that majority is, you're going to win out. And that's fine, but you need to have everybody to have a voice. And a voice is not a vote necessarily. A voice is representation. And so we need to be representative in different situations. And so when we look at it, we look at a church. We look at a church. I've been to churches where they're multicultural churches. You know, they got everybody there. They got all these different people. You got Black people, white people, people from different countries. You got Asian Americans. You got Hispanic Americans. You got everyone. Look at the leadership, though. You look at the pulpit, though. Everybody looks the same. And so it may not be anything of not being fair. The only people who may be ministers at the church, maybe you know, if it's a church multicultural and everybody's white, maybe all the ministers are white. Maybe there aren't any Black ministers there. Maybe all of the people who are over, you know, the minister of music, who have the musical talent to be in leadership positions, maybe they're all white. Maybe they, you know. But that doesn't provide representation. That doesn't provide a voice for everybody. You don't have that representation. And so when we're looking at these districts that's being drawn, it doesn't do me any good to have people of color who don't have a voice. This is important. This is important, I believe, and I don't know. Y'all let me know. This is important in our churches now more than ever. When we have so many different types of people from so many different backgrounds who need to have a voice and a say. A voice and a say. So when we're going out and we're doing work, or when we're going out and we're thinking about different populations to serve, and when we're going out and we're thinking about how to spread the word of God, and we're going out and we're thinking about the different activities that we need to do to represent the kingdom, we need different voices to let us know about the different avenues and different places that we need to go. You know, if you ask me about where we need to go, I'm going to tell you what I like. But if I ask somebody else from a different area, different background, they're going to be able to then tell me about things that they know about so that we can get more and gather more. Affirmative action, if for people who don't know historically what affirmative action is, affirmative action, and I'm going to give you the layman's terms and not give you the organized term here. But basically what affirmative action does is it makes it so that there's representation of different groups, of different marginalized groups, based primarily on race. And so it comes to schooling, it comes to jobs, it comes to different, when you have a large organization that you have to have representation. And people say, well, it's not fair. You know, you should give it to whoever's the best. Well, historically, we know that it didn't matter who was the best. You put in who you want to put in. But this goes for representation. And so right now, the courts are looking over the voting, and they're now, which leads into looking over the affirmative action. And it's a question of whether or not everyone should be represented and have a voice. Or now, can we move away from making sure that everyone has a say and just making it so that majority wins, majority rules. A voice may not be enough. Just because you are heard means nothing if what you are saying is not taken seriously or not considered as a choice. Absolutely, absolutely, and you know, absolutely, you're right. Because there's a lot of times when you get somebody, or you got these token people, or you got who just get to talk. Oh yeah, say what you want to say, but then when it comes to decision making, we're not really listening to you at all. I do think that that's absolutely terrible. You're right. It may not be enough. Um, it's not enough. You know, at the end of the day, with Alabama, with Mississippi, with Ohio, a lot of these people, a lot of these places where they're trying to redistrict and marginalize um, people of color districts, and now it's just turned into districts where it's watered down. Even if you gave each in each location, you're like, well, let's give people of color one little district over here, and get them one little district over here. That's not enough, you know, because your voice is going to be heard through that representative. But at the end of the day, just like it says here, you got one person. You know, we got 10 districts. You got one person. We don't have to take nothing that you say seriously. Look, we done gave you a nice little spot. You can say what you want to say. We're not taking it seriously. And so when we take it outside of those larger situations and we look at our personal lives, especially you know, again, our churches, if we're not listening to what people have to say and taking it seriously, then you're right. It means absolutely nothing. I think that we need to be clear that there's a responsibility of us, especially in the church, and a responsibility of us outside, because now we have to talk more, I think, more about Christian life and church life, about what we're going to do than we can about just life in general um, out there in the world. We have to decide how we're going to be as people, Christian people, and then let that permeate everywhere else, because the things that we had before are breaking down and going away. And the reality of the matter is, they're not our things anyway. So the court system, the way that the courts were set up to protect and help people who've been marginalized, people of different groups, a lot of that's going away. Clarence Thomas and his friends are trying their hardest, their darndest to take away the Voting Act, to take away affirmative action, you know, to do things like that. And so if those are not here anymore, you know, they have the numbers and the votes to do the things that they want to do. If those things are not here anymore, we have to decide how we're going to act as people. And as people of faith, one of the responsibilities I think that we have is to listen to those who are marginalized. Why is that a thing? Am I just talking opinion about um, how I feel, or is that a responsibility that is said of how we're supposed to um, take care of those who are the least of those? And taking care is just not doing what we want to do, but it's also our responsibility to listen to what they need. If I tell you what you need or tell you what you're supposed to do and never listen to you, I'm not really taking care of you. You know, ain't no point. Let's go visit the sick. Ain't no point for you to come and visit me so you can just tell me what you think all day. Like, you're not listening to me. Like, I can't, you know. And I think that's what's going on. We're not listening to those who need to be listened to, the marginalized. That's a responsibility that we have. And so again, since the world, the broader world, the law, the Constitution, the Supreme Court is, since they're not going to validate listening to other people, they're not going to validate, um, you know, I wanted to say morality, but that's not really what it is. But if they're not gonna keep up with the fact that, you know, we need to treat others like we want to be treated and respect others, regardless of who they are. Then we have to do that as the church, and we have to do that as individuals. Um, you know, what has been said is that voting rights will most likely go away, and what has been said is that affirmative action will most likely go away. And so to be the model for what the world should be, we as people of faith have to show others how it's supposed to be. That we need to be able to allow others to have representation. So again, we do it with the church. You know, if we want, if it's fair, if it's fair, if it's it's fair, we're not looking at anybody's characteristics and we're just going to make everything fair. So majority rules, then it's not representative, and that's the point that I'm trying to make. I think that's the point that needs to be very clear. If it's colorblind, if it's socioeconomic blind, if it's whatever, then that means you're not listening to everyone. You're speaking for them. And I don't think that's what we're supposed to do. I think we should be listening to one another. And I think that people should have a voice and an opinion. Now you have leaders who are in place for a reason. They're ordained and they're the leaders, and that's who makes the call. But I think that other people should have voice. Ooh, who defines fair? And that's who defines what fair is? And reality of the matter is that's not even what we're. Um, you're right. Who defines fair? That's not even what I'm saying here or looking for here. I'm talking about representation because you can't determine what's fair. What's fair to one person is not what's fair to another. But what you can't really debate too much on is representation. Have an opportunity representation. Some people don't think that women, and it's still to this day, some people don't think that women should have the voice, when in the church. They shouldn't have a voice, a leadership voice, or, I believe representation. You have a voice. And so it doesn't have to be fair, or we have a majority men here, so blah 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 in leadership positions, so we got to listen to what all the men say. We don't have any. No. I ain't talking about what's fair based on the numbers or the statistics, or fair based on this. I'm talking about representation, and everybody should have representation if they want it, if they desire for it, if they need it. But we got to be able to listen to one another, because that's how we keep from abusing people on purpose or unintentionally. How many times you people don't abuse other folk and they're like, well, I never knew. I didn't know this. I didn't know that what we were doing was bad. I didn't know. I never really thought about you. And that's the whole thing. Never thought about you because you never had representation. So and I know that's kind of like a talking to and blah 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 blah. I'm not trying to beat you over the head with it, but that's what it is. We need to remember that we need representation. Affirmative action does that. It did that. And if it's gone, unfortunately, we need to make sure that we still believe in representation, not in just putting in the folk. You need representation. Everybody needs to be represented in some form or fashion. Voting rights may go away, but in our area, in our lives, in the way that we're going to roll, we're going to still believe in representation and believe in letting people have a voice. And so that's where we are. And that's it. That is it. I know that that's a weird one, and sometimes when you sit back and you look at, oh man, you talk about voting and you talk about affirmative action, and you really kind of get in those weird areas, but it's about listening to other people. Because we get in our own way. Well, I got money, or I got status, or I'm smart, and I went to college, or I did this, or I did that, or I'm from this family, or blah 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 blah. I don't need, I can make all the decisions for everybody. I'm smart enough and everything like that. You can be the smartest person in the world. You don't know what you don't know, and you didn't live the life that these other people live, or the experience that other people have. And we always need to listen to one another to be able to get the full picture of what's going on. And that's what we don't do now. You know, whoever thinks that they're the smartest person in the room don't listen to anybody else. I can make the decisions smart enough. I know enough, and that's not that. I don't think that's the way that we should be. You know, I'll tell you this: if you want to love your neighbor and treat your neighbor as yourself, you want to be listened to. So, in order to treat your neighbor like yourself, you got to listen to your neighbor. Representation. All right. Thank you for everybody who joined us. I love the comments and I appreciate the comments that came in. As always, this is Impact 2022. We are here on Tuesdays, but on Thursdays as well. Same place, YouTube or Facebook. We have Thursday Thirst, and on Sunday, same place, YouTube or Facebook. We have worship service, and welcome you to join us. Want you to join us. And so again, as always, we'll be here this week, and we'll be here next week, and God willing, the weeks after. And please join us again for Impact 2022. Have a good one.